Yeah, I was
Uh,
actually surprised. I was like, "Oh," because when I woke up and saw that, I was like, "Oh, okay."
yeah, a little surprise on my part too. I won't deny. I'm not unhappy about it, but I won't deny that it's true. Um, and I think that so. Let me just kind of fill everybody in on what's been going down um, on that topic. So Nair found the ideal conversation piece in terms of what we'd be looking for a seller of anything, not just a seller of um, not just a seller of self storage, but this is a direct owner who possesses their property um, and is in control. Is the guy apparently we want to talk to, and we're as close to that reality as we can. He mentions another partner, but whatever. And is ready to sell. He's a tired landlord for various reasons with everything. And commercial world trading is really all about the number spread. Meaning, it's not about do you like the property to a certain extent? Do you like the property? But mostly, it's about, hey, listen, the numbers make sense here. They don't make sense here. And that was a difficult process because we initially did numbers that came in where we wanted them, but way below where he needed them. Um, and so we basically, you know, finally, he pushed back and wasn't willing to take the offer, and had an exciting little day because I thought I had a lock on it and whatever. My finally our mentor got involved and he's like, yeah, you guys can go up to here. This is okay. And here's why. He kind of walked us through where we were not able to lock it down. So we went up a lot on the offer, and um, it looks like the seller has accepted the offer, and we're just waiting for the letter of intent. Which in the commercial world, the seller wants an agreement of sale, a signed document. What he's getting is a letter of intent, a signed binding document that gives us the time to a um, complete a purchase agreement, which in the commercial world can be a little more confusing. Two attorneys have to do a little bit of dancing about, are we buy how much is being allocated to land versus how much is being allocated to business value or other things, which affects taxation and some other things. And so it can be a little bit more confusing than maybe necessary, I guess. Um, and so, but anyway, we're at that point. And that's kind of what I wanted to cover today is how negotiations happen, which is not where you guys sort of live and play. The negotiation, you're like Nair has been sort of watching it and we've been talking offline, but the negotiation is always us to the end side. And that's for two reasons. That's for licensing reasons, you're not licensed, and that's also for experience reasons. Um, because there has to be an experience level, and I'm actually looking for something on my. I have an unrelated situation. I just have to look for something on my computer if I even have it, and I think I might have found it. I'm not sure. Um, but so the way a negotiation process in most scenarios works, most residential scenarios, is it's about the value of the property. It's about our deal analyzer um, and us and full information. In fact, I just got a text from Alex, which I want to see if Alex sent me anything on that. Um, no, I've not seen it. Okay. Alex wants to make an offer on a piece of land, and I said, he's like, well, what do you think of this offer? I said, well, I think I haven't seen the whole file, so I don't have an opinion as to the offer because I don't have an opinion on the whole file. So that's the first step in knowing what something's worth. In the residential world, we're looking at sale comps, residential 5 units and below, and up to 20 in certain scenarios. We're looking at sold comps, rental values, comp values, flip values, repairs, the stuff we've been talking about for months. In commercial world, it's that stuff, but since there's less data of that stuff, it's very much a financial calculation, and it's very much a what do the parties agree something is worth, and that's really where it kind of comes. That's where really where the rubber meets the road, I guess, is in terms of, you know, seller. I have an unrelated transaction in Michigan where we think it's worth 1.1, the seller thinks it's worth 1.7. They're doing the numbers based on their operational expenses on the property, based on them sitting and literally, you know, running the property themselves. We're basing the numbers, so we're doing the numbers differently. And at the end of the day, something is worth what someone's willing to pay for it. And the broker said to me yesterday on that transaction, well, we have other people willing to buy it. I said, great, take those offers. He's like, well, you know, if you did this, this, and this, it could be worth that to you in a couple of years. I said, great, then in a couple of years, if those things are done, I'll buy it. You know, it's worth it to me at the number I offered. It's worth it to the seller to not say yes to that offer. That is fine. In this case, we got through all that and got where we needed to get on a sale price. So that's the first step, is determining what something's worth and going through the negotiation process. Negotiation also involves terms. We spend a lot of time offering the seller finance options, creative options, trying to get the number higher by basically saying, because we're talking about a $600,000 deal, so the 30% down is $180,000. So if he holds the 180 at 5%, we can creep our number up a little bit. And you know, so we went through a lot of things there, and I don't want to go specifically into them, but just to say that that's the process where our experience, first of all, our licensing, which matters a little less in the commercial space, but our experience matters a lot. Now, when does it go from sale comp to financial comp? 5 and below, it's sale comp. The bank will look, so for us, it's both. We always do both. But for a bank, they're going to look 5 units and below at pretty much at sale comps. They might take income into account a little bit, but mostly they're going to look and say, yeah, this 4 units sold for this many. And I shouldn't say 5 and below. Usually it's 4 and below. It's usually below 5. 5 to about 2025, they look at both. They look at sold comps and they look at income valuation. So if sold comps are $500,000, but income justifies a loan of $1 million, they'll lean a little more toward that. So that becomes the gray area, that 5 to 20 unit area, where the appraiser will look a little more toward numbers. Once you get above about, you know, teens or 20 units, that's when it all becomes about the numbers. And really, that's when the negotiation gets creative, because that's when it's whose version of the numbers. For example, in this version for this seller, we have, in this version for this seller, he was running it on, you know, he had $82,000 in gross income, I think it was. And he had operational hard costs, meaning what he wrote a check for, of about $9,000. So in his world, he's taking in $70,000, or yeah, about that, before he pays his mortgage. Good deal. Pay a mortgage of 40 grand, still have 30 grand left. Woohoo, we're winning. In my world, not being local, not being willing to walk the property every week, not being willing to blah, 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 I have to pay out for those services. So talk to me about what I have to pay out for those services. and I will do my numbers based on those payouts. So he had a cost load of 10%, about, or whatever, 12%, whatever 10 grand on 80 grand is. I got a cost load of 35% by the time I hire the missing services. I think we eventually tweaked that down to about 25% to try to make this deal work. But, we had to be somewhere near that number. So bottom line is he's looking at a net operating income of 70 grand because all he's doing is paying his hard costs, and woohoo on the rest. It's all money to him. He can spend it however he wants. We have a higher load, so we're looking at 50 grand. So he's saying, my profit is 70 grand. I'm saying the profit is 50 grand. Obviously, those are not the same valuations. And a very nice guy, very understanding, which is good to find, because you want something you want someone that's willing to dance and understand where you're coming from. And he was talking to one other buyer, possibly, kind of hard to tell. And he was talking about he had a broker he was looking at. He had a broker that he was talking to about the property as well, and the broker was talking to him in his other ear about broker valuation. And I explained to him, I said, I will never meet the number your broker wants. I can guarantee you that right off, because the broker is going to come in with a higher number and let it slide down while you have a negotiation. And in the broker number, you got to pay the broker fee, which was $600,000, be about 36 to 50 grand. I said, so I'm not going to meet that number. I'll take a look at that number if you decide to go with him, but probably your broker is telling you a best case scenario story, and it may be true, but I'm the real guy writing a real check. And so it was a really good back and forth conversation saying, hey, here's why we think you're worth this. And he came back and basically said, thank you, no thanks, have a nice day. And then at the last minute, my mentor looked over the numbers and he texted me. He's like, tell that guy to hang on for a little while. I thought I'd seen something in the numbers that could push the value up, but I wasn't able to get it to calculate. Thankfully, my mentor came in and he said, yeah, he's changed these things. And he showed us how we really need to be prepared for higher down payments and slightly lower interest rates. And he's like, do that and you're there. He said, also, I believe in the market more than you do. He said, my experience tells me this market's a little stronger than you think it is. So that's the other reason we want to be involved in the negotiation point, because we have more experience than you do, and we have mentors that have more experience than us. So if it becomes confusing, then we kind of can work with it from there, I guess would be the lack of a better way to say it. So in the negotiation process, there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of what is the seller looking for? And that was the one part this seller was a little bit unclear on. He was very clear about one thing. He wanted to clear his debt. And he said whatever he said was his number. 615 or 625. And then when he showed us his debt was substantially lower. So all of a sudden I'm aiming down there. And then he finally clarified in the final negotiation that that what he's really looking for is to clear the debt and the capital gains he's going to eat on the property. Capital gains are the taxes and so forth. Capital gains are the taxes and so forth on the profit he made. He bought it for $4 something. And he bought it for $4 something, and he's profiting, $300,000 or whatever. So finally, we nailed that down, and we made an offer to him. We went up from an offer of about $540, I think was our top offer, and we were able to make our bottom offer $570. And our upper offers were seller finance, which probably wouldn't have fit his model, and ended up not fitting his model, but that seller finance made it worth more. And he and I were going back on the group text with Nair this morning, and we do this by group text so you guys can see it. And, he's like, well, my accountant's not available till after April 15th, and I want to wait for that. And I said, well, I said, call me later. I said, I'm not saying whether or not I'll be available. Because I said, we're actively looking to buy. And in those 2 weeks, you're going to be actively talking to other people. And we're not doing this to have a bidding war. When you're ready, call us. We'll definitely have a conversation. But I won't promise this is still available. And he came back and said, can you do this number, 600 even? Regular, straight up, boring, good old whatever. And I said, yes, we can. And so at that point, we've basically struck a deal. So at that point, the next step is to write a contract. In the residential world, that is a simple contract. That is a letter of intent. That is an agreement of sale. Literally, whether it's a PAR agreement of sale or it's a off-market agreement of sale or whatever it is, it's an agreement of sale. It's a document that says we are doing X for Y for Z and life goes on. In the universe of this, it's a document called a letter of intent, which is a signed binding document, but it's not attorney reviewed. It's a document that says the two parties have agreed to these general terms, and they give each other 10 days to have various legal various attorneys do the attorney stuff, basically. It's, it's a sort of dumb way to say it. So that's what we just presented to him. My partner's going to review it. My mentor's going to review it, but we just sent it over to him and said, hey, and Nair's seen it too, saying, hey, this is what we believe we've agreed in principle. And in the commercial world, you have lots of other landmines that you don't have in the residential world. You have, first one is environmental studies. Technically you should do an environmental study in every property you buy, but very unlikely that your small residential home lot, was ever used as a dumping site, was ever used as PCB, developing some sort of chemical warfare or something dangerous. You might be on something that was pre-existing and no one knows about, but very unlikely that your little residential lot was ever used for something scary like that. So, but in any commercial property, and really of any land of scale, you're buying a single empty lot, you're not going to worry about it. But in any land of scale, you're going to want an environmental survey, phase 1, phase 2, whatever is required. You start with phase 1 and go from there. You're going to want to, do other things about zoning variances and knowledge of zoning and this and that and the other thing. So there's lots more stuff in commercial. And what's also in commercial when you're buying a business is the intangibles, the goodwill, the business operation. Like he mentioned this morning, the Google profile, which has high Google ratings. And those things also need to be verified and investigated and determined a value. Because sometimes the purchase price is $600,000. We might want to say all of the intangibles are $200,000, and the building and land is $400,000. There might be a taxation reason for that. So this is why the letter of intent brings you to. So in the normal residential, small, multifamily world, you're going to pretty much, here's a contract. I've never done a deal yet that was any kind of residential where people sleep. I've never done a small one under 5 years of stuff I personally buy. Here's an agreement of sale. We're not getting into the fancy stuff. I'm buying an apartment complex, I'm buying a hotel, I'm buying self-storage. That's where attorneys get involved. It also has to do with the scale of money involved. It has to do with conversations of who's going to own the LLC, who's going to own the brand name. Because in this case, he's keeping up a couple facilities that use the same brand name. So we don't get to keep the brand name. So we're buying the business, the location, and kind of the goodwill, but we're not buying all the goodwill because he's keeping the brand name. We basically are whatever. So that's the bullet point in the LOI. So in a normal residential conversation, everything you need to know is there. Real simple. Da, 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 da. In a commercial conversation, not everything you need to know is there. And in a commercial conversation, the in a commercial conversation, we're laying out the bullet points of the conversation, and we're laying out the bullet points of the conversation, and the lawyers are going to take care of the rest. So this also affects the timeline of a deal. In a residential deal, we do 4 weeks due diligence on the wholesale side, and we do, a couple weeks for title. We're done in a month or two. In the commercial world, we're doing, in this case, it's a 10-day LOI, 30 days due diligence, meaning, so the LOI period is for us to get it to the attorneys and for us to review his financials and his documents, because now we got to go back the 4 years he's operated the business, show me your actual bank statements, reports from your financial people, yada, 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 yada. I don't bother on that on a 2-family house. I pretty much say, I know what 2 rentals should be, and yeah, this is either right or wrong. But I need him to prove to me that he's not just showing me a spreadsheet for the last 12 months, pretending there's numbers and pretending there's income. I want to see the checks. I want to see the bank statements. I want to see the tax returns. I want to see something that backs it all up. So that's what the 10 days is for. And then if we like what we see there, we go to an agreement of sale, put more money down, and then we have 30 days to get people on site. I'm going to fly out to his location. I'm going to hire it's not called a property inspector for self-storage, but yeah, a property inspector. I'm going to have the environmental survey guy done. I'm going to have those things done. If he's had them done before, great. I can use those reports and go to those companies and speed the whole thing up. But I'm going to hire my experts, whoever I decide, same or different, and say, here's a check. You work for me. Now, now reevaluate. So that's what happens in the first 30 days. Then the last 45-ish are when the bank gets involved. Now, the bank's already involved by the middle part of the first 30, but that's when the lender says, okay, now let's look at the underwriting. Now the lender starts their process. So commercial takes longer, basically. But all of it works the same way in terms of the sale process is the same, it's just longer and has more steps in commercial. Land could be one way or it could be the other, depending on, are you buying a house lot or are you buying, 100 acres? Land is very much an open conversation. For that purpose. So any questions on that? Nair, do you have any questions or anything?
So you're saying basically, so when I was listening, I was trying to figure out, are you saying that what your mentor said, sometimes we might just have to come to terms with, or not come to terms, getting used to just putting more down payment? Is that specifically for this property in itself, or is that like the new standard of it? Like you would just have
that comes into, that number never is, I mean, that number has been 2025 for a reasonably period of time.
Yeah.
That comes into 3 things. So the first thing is our mentor doesn't know our credit situation, which is in our case excellent. The second thing is down payment and percentages and so forth on that change based on economy,
right?
Based on what lenders think of a certain sector of business, self-storage, mobile home, whatever, based on lender fear, basically. Right. If the lender and we still have, which has just occurred to me, I need to include in the LOI, that it's possible that I probably have 20 hours into this deal so far. It's possible that Because so let me take a step back. If he was going to be a second lien mortgage holder, if he was going to be holding some of the equity, it's possible the lender might say, hey, listen, we normally do 80-20, 80% lender, 20% equity. But
Right.
because there's a second position in place, the seller, now we want to be 70-30.
Okay.
But meaning everyone total 70-30, not the bank 70-30, but bank plus lender have to be 70. And the banks do that because they're scared the second position mortgage holder is going to run to foreclosure court. So that can change per deal. That can change periodically because of financing situations, national interest, all that sort of big brain stuff just designed to screw the rest of us. Or that can change because of who the borrower is. Mark and I are accredited. I mean, Mark and I it would hurt, but we could scrape together the cash to do this deal out of our own funds. So like a bank's going to look at us and say, holy crap, you guys are overqualified to do this, whatever. So that's what we're hoping. Mark keeps saying, well, I'm hoping we go to a lender, that Jack, our mentor, is not right, that there might be, the bank might look at us more favorably, So that all depends. And so does interest rate. Interest rate depends on who the borrower is. Interest rate depends on, in term, how long the loans go for. In loans, there's two things. There's amortization. How long is the math done based on? And there's term. When does the rate change or the refinance is needed? We're banking on 25 years at 7%. 25-year amortization, 7% running the entire 25 years. We might find out that banks are going to look at this and say, yeah, we'll give you 25-year amortization, but we're going to readjust you every 5 years. So we're going to have to then stop and say, are we willing to take the risk that rates are going to be lower in 5 years than higher? Because if we do our math based on 7 and in 5 years rates are 12, okay, well, that's not a number we were planning on,
Yeah.
Or we think it's going to be 7 and in 5 years rates are 2. Well, then we just won on the adjustment game. So all the lender crap is very gray and variable and pretty much varies by lender by lender. We were looking at a deal in Texas, and some lenders were saying to us, I mean, that deal in Texas was $250,000. Turned out to be actually a fraudulent deal. A whole interesting story there. But there wasn't even an actual seller involved. It was just totally fake.
Mm-hmm.
They were just using they were using a real property to try to scam. But anyway, we were talking to banks who said, we just simply don't go that small. We just won't loan that small amount of money. It just isn't worth it to us. So that's where lenders and so the whole lending thing becomes a cloud, and it really comes down to lenders being in charge. And here's how stupid it gets. The last thing I'll say on that is I've had deals, and I lost the seller over this. I've had deals where the seller was sitting in her U-Haul ready to come to closing when the bank's final underwriting said, we're not doing the deal. Like, she's packed her house up. We had it. Everybody was ready. And at the last minute, the bank said, you know what? We're pulling the clear to close. We're not doing it. So lenders can screw you up to the last possible day. That's why cash sales are always going to win. Or not always win, very often going to win.
Yeah, that's kind of wicked. I mean, we almost experienced that with Garfield on how they were taking with the title and everything. So it's basically the same thing as that. Like, you got to just wait for them to. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, you literally cannot. You cannot predict it, kind of thing. So, yeah. So, any other questions?
No, it was pretty simple. I will say I am kind of irritated a little bit because I was just informed, and I was keeping track of it for a minute because my fiance that I told you about, she has friends in the real estate industry, and she told me last week, she was like, yeah, I have this friend and he posted something. He's an agent and he posted a property in Ohio, and I had just remembered because you just said you're doing another deal in Ohio. It was a property. It was like 93 acres for $100,000. And I said, "What?" Like you see how you see your reaction? I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, it had a nice little house on it, a couple little structures, and they just wanted like $135,000 for it." So then I reminded her of it, and she did her research into it, and now it's pending. I said, "See, this is why you got to be quicker. Like when I tell you to jump on stuff, this is why you got to be quicker because that sounded crazy to me."
Well, and just to bring it up, because Alex had the question yesterday. I'm not sure Alex keeps having technical issues on this, but Alex brought it up yesterday that can we wholesale or work with agents? Okay, so here's the rule: if it's listed, we can't talk to the seller.
Yeah.
If it's listed, we can represent a buyer on the deal, or in rare cases, we might put the property under contract through the agent with the seller and then try to do an assignment deal to a third party buyer. Rare cases, first of all, it has to be worth all that rigmarole. Second of all, the agent has to be willing to get her buyer or his buyer to sign an or assigns agreement that gives us all of our exit clauses.
Right.
And so like, in that case, that agent who has, property for $1 an acre or whatever it was, that may be a deal that's worth having a conversation with the agent saying, hey, can we get a contract? Can we this? Can we that? I mean, but practically then we have to turn our engine on for land buyers in Ohio. And we have to realize again that he's already put it out there at that price.
Yeah.
So, and whenever something's published, listed, advertised, he's advertising it for $1,000 an acre. That means we have to get it for probably $500 an acre and market it for $700 an acre. So like, is he going to tell his client to take a big enough hit to give us a seat at the table?
Yeah, and
probably not.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I was like, I've never heard of somebody saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna do 93. I'm gonna have 93 acres, and I only want 100,000 for it." Because when she described it to me, I'm like, "Yeah, there's no way I'm touching it." And she was like, "Well, it's 100,000," and I was like, "Oh,
yeah,
probably gotta ask because we normally don't do ages, but that sounds like crazy, like good." Like I was like, "Okay, let me see." But then when she found a further research, she was like, "Never mind, it's already pending."
Yeah, well, exactly.
But,
yeah, but here's the thing: if she first of all, she's got a friend who's an Ohio agent. We may need him on a future deal, so let's have that relationship. But also, there may be a time where an agent's willing to say, "Yeah, I'll," we can always, like, if that agent didn't want to do a side deal with us, didn't want to do an assignment deal, that doesn't mean we couldn't put it out to our buyers and say, hey, listen, there's 100 acres, if you're interested, call me. And then we would just have to call him and be like, hey, here's the deal, and we would simply represent the buyer. We'd say to the buyer, hey, listen, if a deal is made here, it's 3% for us.
Okay.
Or whatever, but basically, so, MLS isn't, and so I just want to be clear, like MLS is not possible. It's just, MLS is not possible. It's just, there's more hoops and more maybe nuts.
Yeah, that's understood. I tried to, like, now that I truly understand, I tried to really like avoid it because I know we're gonna have to jump through more.
Yeah.
When it comes to things like commercial and or residential. I know when you have an agent involved, it's just another hurdle, and we already got enough as it is. So I tried to avoid it. But just like I told her, I said if it's ever one of those things where it's like too good to pass up, like the $100,000 93 acres, where it's like too good to pass up, then just bring it my way anyway. But 9 times out of 10, those are like the rare cases where you can only bring it. Like I would be like even invest in it at this point, just
and that's exactly, and that's where you and that's where a relationship with the agent and say, hey, listen, if you've got something where you think we can be of value, you've got something where your seller is looking for something fast, you've got something where you're not able to sell it and you want to get creative, letting the agent know we're out here, you are connected with a licensed broker, is great, but they are more of a sort of a needle in a haystack. I mean, and it's and also they're a needle in a haystack for me because I don't look for them a lot. Now, on the listed properties, and this goes for commercial as well, like we discussed yesterday, you want to do commercial, there are certain criteria you can talk to agents about expired listings. Hey, listen, can you send me expired listings in your market? Because I can send you expired listings within the markets that I cover, and you can go ahead and call them. But you also talk to agents, and this can be even agents in my market, but anywhere nationally. Hey, listen, I'm looking for deals that have been on the market for more than 60 days. I'm looking for deals where the seller is showing more motivation than they might have when they first signed. Because some sellers won't necessarily drop their price on the market, but if something's been on the market 60, 90 days and there's been no interest, and I don't care if they drop their price or not, but if it's on the market for 60 or 90 days, maybe they get tired. Now, maybe they've told their seller, their agent, this is my price, $1 less, don't even call me. But it's at least worth putting the word out to some agents, like one agent per market, and say, hey, listen, can you periodically search me for things that have been on the market more than 60 or 90 days? Things that have shown, things that, are close to expiring or have expired. I can give you those kinds of things. And that's where another way to build a relationship with one or two agents per market, like maybe a self-storage agent, a residential agent, whatever. Don't have 4 residential. I mean, you can, there's nothing wrong with it. But at a certain point, if 4 agents send you the same deal, then who do you pay?
Yeah.
But basically, you can ask them for that, because the longer something sits on the market, the slower it, the slower reaction, basically the longer it's on the market, the more the seller is possibly getting tired of the deal.
Right.
And so that is another place to plug in agents. So any other questions or thoughts on this kind of transaction?
And my last question would just be, really, since I'm going to be doing mainly self-storage and commercial now. And I was listening. You said you found one in Michigan. I guess it would be like, what would be is it still the same markets as per what we're already doing, or is there like specific markets for the?
So we have, and this could also be something that I can hook you up with the brokers that we look at stuff. And this is where a lot of time goes down the drain. Because we have, if a listing comes on Crexi, it comes on LoopNet, we at least try to glance at it and see, are we even in the universe for this deal? Do we like the market enough? Are the numbers they presented worth it? And even that takes a couple hours. So It's kind of like, whenever Mark and I have time, we want to talk, we want to skip the listings for all the reasons I've said. The broker's always looking to get a higher number and But this one in Michigan, literally, we were at the conference a couple of weeks ago. And the broker who had this deal came up, and this was like, he just got it as he was like, he woke up this morning and someone signed the listing agreement with him. So he knew nothing about the deal. And he kind of rattled off some stuff. And I'm sitting there taking notes on the numbers, and he's showing pictures of it and whatever. And I'm just, me and some other people in the room, probably like 50, 60 of us, I don't know. And we're like, he wants $2 million. And I'm like, I'm just literally penciling it right out. Kind of like those screenshots I sent you of the calculator and the mortgage calculator.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, no way in hell. Because his pitch on that property, so this guy had built, I'll say 50,000 square feet, I forget. Whatever. This guy had built a facility which in 5 years was only half full.
Okay.
In a small market with a lot of existing supply. Now, whenever we look at possibly building, which we haven't done yet and don't love doing, or whenever we look at any kind of a development deal, like this one, we looked at the supply, which is actually pretty good, but we didn't care because he's already full. So I'm looking at it and saying, all right, I might have a couple dollars a unit that I can up the prices on, but pretty much, am I okay if this never changes? Because he's in a small market that's grown like 1.5%, whatever tract, like you said, a year or 5 years or whatever. So he's in a small market that's basically stagnant. Okay. He's 1.5, and the town in Florida I was looking at was 6.9 growth %. So he's stagnant, basically, comparatively. And so I ran the numbers on this deal that this guy had. This guy had way overbuilt. National average, people need 7 square feet of self-storage. His market had 13, 12, something like that. Not an undoable number, but a number where you have to look and say, okay, well, why is 13 okay to have to ramp up? 50% of his facility is empty. And they were advertising it at, hey, the price we're asking is $30 a square foot of built out space, which is like a third of what it costs you to build. Yeah, but only half of that is rented. And I don't know that there's any future rental for the rest of it, because I'm looking at all these supply numbers and whatever. So I'm saying, okay, well, so I ran it and I said, you know what, I'm going to buy this because I don't see a rocket ship of growth. I'm going to buy this based on its current income numbers. It's
Right.
got to be bankable today. Now, I wouldn't be against buying something ahead of what it's bankable at if it was like, oh my God, it's going to be worth more. So that's where, and then I will need to ask you a question about that, but that's where on the Michigan deal, we looked at all the same numbers we did here and just came down to, he wants 2 million. I can only afford to pay 1 million. And there's nothing that tells me that it's going to fill the other 50% of the space. And I'm looking at the layout of the property. He's like, oh, we have some extra space. What he had was a parking lot. He didn't have it's a 6-acre property all full of units. It wasn't a 6-acre property with 3 acres extra. And I could say, gee, can I put something else there? Is there another application? Like I got another deal from a broker yesterday, and it was brand new. He had like 50, he was like 12% rented. And he's like, yeah, but look at all of this future development opportunity that you can build into. And when it's built into, it's going to be worth 3 million. So we want 2. And I said, well, yeah, but you only have the income for 500,000.
Right.
He's like, but look at the potential. I said, okay, maybe the potential is worth a couple $100,000, potentially ain't worth $1 million. So a lot of it becomes, what do you see in the deal? And in the case of Michigan, what I saw in the deal was, I'm going to forever have 40 to 50% empty, or I might, if I'm lucky, get to 70. And the broker said to me, and this is his job, he's like, yeah, but the seller is very fat on his expenses. He's putting things on the company that don't need to be on the company. And if you cut that fat, your NOI, your net operating income goes up. And then if you spend money on doing better marketing and better this, then it becomes worth what he needs it to be. And I said, that's great. I agree. If I do all those, and if what should follow all those follows, when I'm done doing all those things, it might be worth that number. He's like, it'll be worth more. I said, okay, maybe it's worth more. But it's worth more because of what I did to it. Right now, I'm not looking at paying him for what it might in the future be worth. I'm looking at paying him for what it's worth today. And I said, if you know of line items in there and you can replace those services with someone else who'll give me a quote for cheaper, I said, I'll look at that part. You know, if his management company is $20,000 and you can show me a quality management company that'll do it for $5,000, I said, I'll look at those changes that can be absolutely documented immediately. They said, but I can't pay a facility in an oversupplied market for what's already, for what I might be, I can't pay anybody for what might happen in the future. And the last example I'll give is this Houston suburb market where I got a call from somebody or an email, might have been a Facebook post, I forget, was the guy wanted $300,000, and I ran the numbers, which were official numbers from a reporting software. And I said, I'll give you 2. And he immediately said yes, which is a bad sign, because when you take 30% off and they don't even blink. But I just, okay, great. And we're doing all this by email, back and forth, wrote an LOI. He liked the LOI. We were basically about to sign. And I just wanted to talk to him about something else I thought of. So I called the facility. Facility owner called me right back. And he's like, you've been talking to Tracy, right? I said, yeah, is Tracy your boss? Like, no, Tracy's fake. We've had 9 people come to us complaining about Tracy because he's taking or she's taking deposits from people to show the property and whatever. He's like, you didn't give me any money. I said, no, I don't give shit money until the day of closing. And he's like, let me tell you about it. He's like, I bought the place for $400 2 years ago. He's like, I put it on the market for $750. Nobody wanted to sell. I'm going to keep collecting the income until somebody wants to pay me $750 to $1 million. He's like, so just, he's like, what do you have to negotiate at? 200. He's like, I wouldn't even sell it for that after it burned down. But the reason I wanted his property, first of all, because it was a Houston suburb, about an hour from Houston, but it was growing at 6% or 4% per year.
That's interesting.
Texas is just going crazy. So I'm like, well, you know what? Whatever I'm buying it at, I know it's going to be worth more in the future. So a lot of it comes into the art. So I'm not sure if I followed with what you were asking, but that's kind of where we're at.
Oh, okay. Because it was basically like a market thing. Because the markets I've been doing since I've been doing commercial these past like 2 weeks is like Alabama, Indiana, Michigan. So I'm trying to find somewhere in Pennsylvania, but every time I use like PropStream or Batch, it automatically comes up 0. And I don't know if that's because their data on commercial properties is like weaker than their data on residential.
Yeah. So and actually, I brought it. I got to bring it up to Mark again, and just because I pretty much said to Mark, I said, why aren't we just? Because I said, Mark, one of two things: either get him more data, or give him access. I said, we got to do one of the two. Either you want to spend the time getting him the data, or you want to give him access. So I'll have that answer for you later today.
Because I have time, like I literally have the time to sit here and either gather data myself and like, use little techniques that I use in PropStream to try to find like good leads and things like that. I have that, like I can sit there and do that all day and night. Like that's what I do all the way up till 5, 6 o'clock in the morning anyway. So it's like,
okay, all right. So I'll right after this, I'll call him and pretty much hopefully get that done. But basically, so here's the thing: is that the markets you're looking for with self-storage particularly. All right, mobile home parks, other categories that would be more of a Crexi, and we don't have the Crexi back office software because it's $400 a month.
sheesh.
We can get it, but whatever. But what you're looking for is, and by the way, you can also just for like mobile home parks or car washes. There is nothing wrong with simply Googling, because mobile home parks and car washes are much, and laundromats. It's much the supply data isn't really there. Meaning, am I building a new mobile home park? I'm going to do some real research. But if a mobile home park is profitable now, I'll take it. If it's in a dense market and possibly profitable, like that one's much easier to read. So if you like pick a market and you say, hey, listen, there's a mobile home park, let me call them. Absolutely. With self-storage, that will never be a batch leads category, because what self-storage has to tell you, self-storage, Tract IQ or StoreTrack or whatever, is what you're looking for is 3 criteria primarily. You're looking for supply in the market, 7 to 10, 7 to 12, or less than 7. 7 is the average. And then when you start going higher, you start having to ask questions like, okay, why? Now, in our meetings, people are buying 9s, 10s, and 11s, but there's deeper research to say, okay, why is that good? Now, if it's an operating facility, if it's at 80, 90, 100%, I don't care the density because I've already got the customers.
Right.
That's why when he sent me the longevity of his customers last night, sorry, I should have sent this other email out. So anyway, so basically, so basically, that's where the self-storage world differs from the mobile home park or the other world. A car wash and a laundromat, I'm looking at numbers pretty much. I'm also looking at whether or not they're rented land or buildings or their own land or buildings. Because if they're rented land, then I have a little bit less interest in them. So those other industries, but basically batch leads is never going to help you there. I will get you more Tract IQ. So really what we're finding we're finding, growth markets are pretty much southeastern US and southern US for the most part. North Carolina, Georgia, like that.
Okay, so North Carolina can work. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, those markets. And the reason I want to get you into Tract IQ, because you don't even have to go by state. There's a what I call a heat map, which is you draw a radius and it will turn counties into colors. And I forget if it's darker or lighter, but darker means lower supply. And you pick, is it supply? Is it income? Is it this? Is that? So once I get you into Tract IQ, I'll teach you all this. But you can pull the whole state or you can just literally fly over and say, well, Luzerne County has low supply and good incomes. Well, let me do that one. You know, Tioga County has high supply and bad incomes. Let me skip that one. You know, da 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 da. And once you find that, that's when you go, you pull that list from within there, and that's also when you go and you do flyovers, and you can because you're looking for the ones that Tract IQ can't find because they're hidden.
Got you.
And so I will, and I know it's a little bit, you know, he's been a little bit slow on this, but I'll just call Mark up and be like, hey, listen, at this point, you know, can you help me with, you know, can we get this done? You know, because you know, and you know, and you know, and also, you know, understand it's his account. It's actually a sub account of somebody else's, so he's being cautious.
Right.
Um,
No, I get that. Like, I'm not mad or anything. I'm just like, listen, like PropStream has been cool so far which I'm surprised, but it definitely is way better than Batchelor's when it comes to pulling commercial. Because Batchelor's kind of goes into like, it kind of has a seizure